Hello and welcome back to Selena Streaming Services. I'm your host, Selena Wheeler, and today I'm joined by the head of Latin American film programming, Selena Wheeler, who's here to tell us about a spotlight series featuring a special selection of films. What have you got for us today, Selena? Firstly, thanks for having me here today, Selena. It's great that we both got promoted since our last roundtable discussion on Meet the Robinsons. Yeah, those sure were good times. I'm really excited. What's in store for us? What have you prepared? You better brace yourself, because this month's selection is gonna blow your socks out of the water. The title of this curation is Mira Mija, Mexico. Spotlight selection on the great films of Mexico. Sorry, Mexico. Can I ask you something, off the record really quick? Yeah. Are you Mexican at all? No. Latina or Hispanic or nada? Okay, I'm sorry if this is like an invasive question, but what qualifies you to be the head of Latin American film programming? I'd really rather not answer that. Mexico has a rich history of film, unbeknownst to many, but knowest to yours truly now. During the 1940s and 50s, Mexico happened to be one of the largest film industries of the world. You might be asking yourself, what happened? Why don't I see Mexican movies anymore? Probably because you're not Mexican or a movie nerd. Well, you're not really either of those either. Shut up, Selena. We'll get back to this later. For Mira Mija, Mexico, I have carefully selected not one, not two, but 5 especially important Mexican films that span the different eras of Mexican cinema. Why did I select these films? Well, they're actually my favorite out of all those that we watched in class. I have a new script. It's actually because these films all have varying levels of fantasy incorporated into them. But our main focus today is the portrayal of, pardon my language, jobs. Yeah, the J word. Love them, hate them. You can't live without them. Unless you're extremely fortunate. Genuinely, how did you get this job? Shh, mija, shh. Está bien, está bien. Now, I'm about to say a lot of words, and you might not understand all of them, but just sit there and look pretty, Selena. You know, like you always do. Mexican cinema has its roots in the Mexican Revolution, which lasted from 1910 to 1920. With this new government came an emphasis on nationalism and what it meant to be Mexican, which I know a lot about. Filmmakers also grappled with this conundrum of representing their society as wholly and uniquely Mexican despite being a mix of many cultures. During the golden age of Mexican cinema, we see a glorification of indigenous culture and the roles associated with it. Roles that go on to become jobs that obsess over greed, capital, and time as the influence of Western society and the effects of colonization prevailed. Urbanization was condoned as Mexican traditions were upheld, but ultimately this tension boiled over, reflected alongside in the dying nationalist films as conventional gender roles began to be challenged. Women could now have authority in jobs, and additionally, what did this new work-life balance look like? Who are you outside of your job? The characters of all these films have their identities heavily intertwined with their jobs, often pushing themselves not because they particularly enjoy their occupations, but because they feel obligated to do so and actually need to do so in order to keep up with a capitalist society. By doing so, they metaphorically or literally leave behind their loved ones. Their obsessions with their livelihoods devalues their characters, destroying relationships and stripping them of their true selves. Even as Mexican films as a whole have become more experimental, it's interesting that they continue to portray one's tie to one's jobs in such a negative, toxic light. New occupations have emerged as a result of neoliberalism, but what remains is a need for identity, for community, for a life that isn't just structured around the set of skills someone is born with or the conditions they are born into, but rather a life that is capable of change and growth. You know what? Well said, Selena. Well said. You make a good point. I think now more than ever this is especially relevant because I feel like we're living in an age where it's easier than ever to climb the ranks of society, to do what you want to, but Many people feel stuck in the same routine of their 9 to 5s. I'm definitely not saying that this is always easy or feasible to break out of this routine, but it's always good to know that there is a possibility, no matter how slight. I mean, just look at us. We used to make stupid videos for our college finals, and now we're with the big leagues. I'm the head of Latin American film programming for some reason, for crying out loud. Don't say anything, okay? Yeah, anyways, I like to think that people go to the movies to be inspired. And I hope that this selection inspires not only filmmakers, but people from all occupations and from all walks of life. Also, these films are just really great, even outside of the roundabout job connection that I made so that they all fit into the theme technically. But Selena, I know that you're not Mexican, so you probably know that much about Mexican cinema, but these films refute stereotypes about Mexican culture by showing the diverse ways that these people live in this country that was built on a mixture and often clash of cultures. Go on and throw out all your racist stereotypes. I know you have a lot, Selena. And learn about how Mexico's film industry rose from the ashes of the revolution, like a Mexican eagle. This industry is very much alive and well today, and it's just that other powerful global industries have emerged to compete with it and its ever-fluctuating funding. Mexican talent is being recognized internationally and brought to make films that aren't Mexican or made in Mexico, with names like Guillermo del Toro and Alfonso Cuarón becoming Hollywood big shots. You know, as the saying goes, there are Mexican movies everywhere for those with the eyes to see. On that note, let's see these movies. First up, it looks like we've got Macario, directed by Roberto Galadón in 1960. Right. This film comes from the tail end of the golden age of Mexican cinema, and it relies on myth-making, serving as a cautionary tale for the impacts of greed and capitalism. Set in 18th century French-occupied Latin America, we follow our eponymous character through a fairy tale-like sequence that transforms his life from one of poverty and hunger, from being a woodcutter, to one of luxury after he makes a deal with death and becomes a healing doctor. This, however, is not without consequence, as the church grows suspicious of him. The countryside setting contributes to the magical realism and tension between old and new, indigenous and Western. This blurry frame, taken from the climax of the movie, depicts Macario's attempt to literally outrun death, as personified from an indigenous framework. He has fled to Death's Cave in hopes of negotiation and protection, but he's faced with the cold, hard truth and an abundance of candles. Neither God nor death can help him. The next movie of this really terribly named selection is The Skeleton of Mrs. Morales. Yes, the next movie of Mira Mija, Mexico is El Esqueleto de la Señora González, aka I Hate My Wife. Directed by Rogelio González, it was also released in 1960, but it has a very different vibe from Macario. As a taxidermist, Dr. González is an expert in preserving life after death, but his wife can't deal with his livelihood and finds it repulsive, putting a serious strain on their relationship. She is a hyper-religious hypochondriac and a pathological liar. This movie is not another win for women, but I'll let it slide, because it's a great movie. Instead of working with death, Dr. González takes matters into his own hands. The characters' identities are tied to their occupations, and so many side characters, such as the raging priest, the historian, and the other doctors, become almost parodies or stereotypes of themselves. Despite this dark subject matter, this characterization, quipping dialogue, and experimental angles make for an entertaining and comedic watch. In this slightly more HD screenshot of El Esqueleto, we see the priest in the foreground testifying in court against Mr. Dr. Morales, who is behind him in a cage. Not sure if this is how they used to hold trials or if this was just for comedic effect, but it's definitely a choice. In a country where nationalism is rooted in familial and religious values, the strain between husband and wife, as well as the priest being the annoying character, does not go unnoticed, making apparent the failure of the crumbling beliefs left over from the revolution. Let's skip a little forward in time, shall we? Why not? Our third selected movie is Temporada de Patos, or Duck Season, a film from 2004 that's as quirky as its director's name. Fernando Imbeck. Imbeck? Interesting name. But this movie is about two teenage boys spending their Sunday home alone in the apartment complex of Tlatelolco, which was built in the 60s with much ambition for modernization and affordability for families, but is now plagued by a history of student protests, massacres, and natural disasters. Even in 2004, the complex deals with frequent power outages, and the boys must cope with the boredom of being trapped in the apartment, making unlikely companions despite not going anywhere themselves. And despite being made almost 40 years after our aforementioned Mexican films in this selection, this film is also in black and white, as seen from this lovely shot, which is actually one of the few scenes set outside the apartment, in a sense. I almost don't want to explain the context because it's one of my favorite scenes and it's so unexpected. But regarding our theme of jobs, it depicts a pizza delivery man who has somewhat unwillingly overstayed his visit. But in this shot, he's receiving a call from his boss in a warped setting that blends reality with imagination. Over the course of the film, we learn that he's unhappy with his job and where he is in life. It's a really strangely heartwarming movie. All right, get that off my screen. I do not want to see that anymore. More movies, but we're traveling back in time now? That's right, back to 1991 with Alfonso Cuarón's Solo con tu pareja. At the brink of the 21st century, these characters have jobs that are a result of a modern globalized society. Our protagonist is a slogan writer who isn't too great at his job and slacks off because he's flat out of ideas and too busy objectifying women anyways. Speaking of women, his boss is one! I would say that this movie is a win for women because the women of this film hold so much power, ultimately changing our protagonist for the better. It's a very funny movie with a colorful set and a very real threat of AIDS, distinguishing itself from earlier films because although it's set in Mexico City and references Mexican culture, it also creates a parody of this by showing stereotypes and not particularly focusing on authentic Mexicanness, whatever that might mean. This frame captures the spirit of the movie pretty well. Most of these people work in the medical field, and although they are technically doing their job by trying to save a life, it's in a very unconventional and drunk way. We've got people from all around the world, many of whom barely know each other, coming together in a team effort, and it's quite touching if you look past all the chaos. This is quite a comedic lineup of films. Is the final film a comedy as well? No. I can't believe you'd even suggest that. Sin Señas Particulares is very much not a funny film, and definitely the only one of this selection that can't be twisted to be a comedy. Released in 2020, it was written and directed by not one, but two women. Yeah, Fernanda Valadez and Astrid Rondero. Another win for women, am I right? Like I said, this is a very serious movie. But yes, another win for women, and the mostly woman cast and crew. Shout out! Women in film. This film tells the story of a mother searching for her recently disappeared son who was immigrating to the United States for work when his bus was attacked by a cartel. The mother is actually, from what I can tell, unemployed, but in a sense, searching for her son becomes her job as she fully dedicates herself to uncovering the mystery, taking any risk necessary to do so. We meet a spattering of characters along the way, including an eye doctor whose life is drastically different than the protagonist's, but whose son has disappeared as well, and a young man who was just deported back to Mexico after working in the United States for years. People essentially become stuck in these occupations and situations, and even those fortunate enough to make a decent living are impacted. This super HD frame is just one example of the incredible use of lighting in this movie. I really like the motif of fire and its varying meanings, from hope and warmth to destruction and hell. In this scene, the mother is comforting the deported man, offering him a proposition that would bring hope into both their lives. The flame is small, but it's steady. Nicely said, Selena. I think that's a good message to end this video with, to keep your flame steady no matter how big it burns. Well, I don't know if that's really the message of the movie, because at the end, let's not talk about any spoilers. I just really needed a way to wrap up this video. Oh, I got you, don't worry. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoy this month's selection of movies from Mira Mija, Mexico. You can watch them all on Selena streaming services, no matter what your job is. Also, they all happen to be on YouTube, where I got the screenshots from.
You're not supposed to tell them that.
And you're supposed to be a good host. Speaking of jobs, you ever consider a career switch?
What?
Great! You're fired.
What? You can't even do that. You're not even my boss.
Actually, I am. I am a boss and a woman. Bet you didn't think that was possible, huh?
Ay, Dios mío.